hunted and wounded alien princess found safety in the arms of the human who defied his own people to protect her. The battlefield was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes with peace, but the heavy silence after death. The wind moved slowly, carrying the bitter smell of smoke and blood. Broken machines lay scattered like the bones of dead beasts. Zira's breathing was weak. She could taste iron in her mouth. Her once bright armor was cracked, black with dust and blood. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she tried to move, but pain exploded in her side. She wasn't afraid of death. She had fought many battles. She had faced enemies stronger than her. But dying here, in the middle of nowhere, with no one to know, that was different. That was worse. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, getting closer. Her heart leapt. Maybe it was one of her soldiers. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. She forced her head to lift, her vision swimming. The shape appeared through the smoke tall, broad-shouldered, armored in black. Her commander, General Croth. Relief flickered in her eyes. "General, you came back," she whispered. Her voice cracked, dry as the sand beneath her. But Croth didn't kneel to help her. He didn't offer his hand. He stood over her like a shadow, his cold yellow eyes scanning her wounds. "You failed," he said, his tone flat. Zira tried to speak, but her throat closed in pain. "The ambush, we were outnumbered." Croth's lip curled in disgust. "Excuses, you're no longer useful." Before she could understand his words, he raised his weapon, a long curved blade, its edge shining even in the dying light. Her chest tightened. "General, you will slow us down. The mission must continue without weakness." And in that moment, Zira understood. He wasn't here to save her. He was here to finish her. Her training screamed at her to fight, but her body was too weak. The blade came down. She twisted, the steel biting deep into the sand beside her head. She felt a rush of hot blood from a cut along her cheek. Croth stared at her one last time, then turned his back. "The desert will take you," he said, walking away without looking back. The sound of his steps faded into the distance. Swallowed by the wind, Zira lay still, her breath shallow. Rage burned in her chest, but it was trapped under the weight of her failing body. She tried to crawl, but her hands sank into the shifting dust. Her vision blurred. The world tilted. The red sky above her turned dark dot, then dash another sound. Not the heavy boots of her people, but lighter steps, quieter, careful. Through the haze, a shadow moved closer. A different shape, taller than most humans, but without alien armor. The figure crouched beside her, gloved hands gently turning. Her face toward the light. A voice, low, steady, and strange. "You're alive, barely." She wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but her lips only formed a weak breath. Warmth touched her skin, pressure against her wound. He was stopping the bleeding. Her instincts told her to push him away. He was human, enemy, but her body didn't listen. Her vision swam again, darkness trying to pull her under. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the man's eyes, not the cold eyes of a soldier, not the cruel eyes of Croth, but eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time: concern. The first thing Zira felt was warmth. It was strange. She had prepared herself to wake to the burning sun of the wasteland, or not wake at all. But instead, there was a softer heat, almost gentle, wrapping around her like a shield. Her eyes blinked open. The ceiling above her wasn't the cracked rock of the desert. It was smooth metal, patched with bolts and wires. She turned her head slowly. She lay on a narrow bed, covered in a blanket far too small for her warrior frame. Then she saw him. The human sat in a chair beside her, his eyes closed, head leaning against the wall. His short dark hair was messy, and a faint scar cut through his right eyebrow. The same eyes she had seen before, The last thing she remembered before blacking out were, now hidden behind tired eyelids, Zira's instinct surged. Enemy. Her muscles tensed, but pain stabbed through her ribs, forcing her to stop. The movement made him stir. He opened his eyes. Calm, steady, almost. "Careful, you're awake," he said, his voice low but clear. Zira's mouth was dry. She tried to speak, but only a rough sound came out. The human moved quickly, pouring water from a metal canteen into a small cup. He held it toward her. She stared at it. Poison? A trick? But her thirst was stronger than her suspicion. She took the cup, her fingers brushing against his. His skin was warmed out as she drank. She noticed the small details. His clothes were worn, patched at the elbows. The armor plating strapped to his shoulder wasn't standard military issue. This man wasn't a regular soldier. "Where am I?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse. "Safe," he answered simply. "For now, safe." She didn't believe it. No place was safe, not for her. The human stood, moving to a small table against the wall. He began mixing something in a dented pot, the smell of cooked grain filling the room. The sound of a soft hum came from the wall's engines. She realized they were inside some kind of small transport shelter, hidden underground. "Why?" she asked. He turned to look at her. "Why what? Why save me? We are at war. You should have left me there." His gaze held hers for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you were still breathing." It wasn't the answer she expected. Before she could ask more, a faint crackle broke the air. A small radio on the table lit up, the static clearing into a rough voice. "Elias, we've got movement. Enemy patrol, maybe 20 clicks out. Looks like they're searching for someone." Elias, so that was his name. He pressed the transmitter. "Copy that. I'll keep my head down." Her blood ran cold. They weren't searching for someone. They were searching for her. Elias noticed her stiffen. "They won't find you here," he said quietly. "I've hidden people before. I know what I'm doing." She stared at him. This man, this human, was risking his life. If they caught her here, he'd be branded a traitor, executed. And yet, his voice carried no fear. She didn't understand him. But as the sound of distant engines began to rumble above them, one thought burned in her mind. If he was willing to protect her, she would have to decide very soon whether she could trust him. The sound came first low, mechanical, and steady. Then the lights followed. Through the thin metal roof of the shelter, faint beams swept across the sand above them, moving like hunting eyes. The ground trembled with the deep thrum of engines. Zira's hand instinctively went to her hip for a weapon, but there was nothing there. She was still too weak to fight, yet every nerve in her body screamed danger. Elias was already on his feet, his movements quick and silent. He grabbed a short rifle from the corner, checked its magazine, and glanced at her. "They're early," he murmured. "They're here for me," Zira said, her voice low but certain. He didn't deny it. Instead, he moved to the wall and pressed a hidden panel. A section of the floor hissed open, revealing a narrow compartment. Beneath, lined with metal and barely big enough for her to fit inside. "In," he said. Zira's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to hide like prey?" Elias didn't flinch. "I expect you to survive." The engines grew louder. Boots hit the sand above, and muffled voices barked orders in her native tongue. She froze. The patrol was close, too close. Elias stepped toward her. "I can deal with them. But if they see you, neither of us walks away from this." She hesitated, pride burning inside her chest. A warrior did not hide. But the memory of Croth's cold eyes came back to her. If they found her now, they'd finish what he started. Reluctantly, she lowered herself into the compartment. The metal was cold against her skin. Elias sealed the panel, leaving her in darkness. She lay still, her breath slow, straining to hear. The door above creaked open. Heavy boots clanged against the shelter floor. "Human," a harsh alien voice growled. "You are sheltering someone." "Where is she?" Elias's voice came, calm and flat. "Don't know what you're talking about." Something crashed metal hitting the wall. "Don't lie to me," the alien snarled. "We tracked her signal here." Zira's fingers curled into fists in the dark. She pictured Elias standing there, facing armed soldiers who could kill him in an instant. Footsteps came closer right. Above her, she heard the faint scrape of claws against the floor. One more step and they'd find the panel. Elias spoke again, louder this time. "If you're looking for trouble, you found it." A sharp sound like a rifle bolt sliding into place. The soldiers turned toward him. She couldn't see, but she could imagine the scene. His stance, his weapon steady, his eyes cold, one long tense moment. Then the leader spat on the floor. "Search the next sector." "She's not worth the time." Boots retreated. The engines rumbled to life again. Slowly, the sound faded into the distance. The panel above her hissed open. Elias's face appeared, shadowed but calm. "Told you," he said, offering a hand to pull her up. For the first time since she met him, Zira didn't feel like arguing. She took his hand, but inside, a dangerous thought began to form. This human was not like the others. And she wasn't sure yet if that made him her greatest ally, or her greatest weakness. The desert wind howled outside, but inside the shelter, it was quiet, too quiet for Zira's restless mind. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, flexing her fingers around the grip of a small knife Elias had given her. The wound in her side was healing but slowly. Every movement reminded her of the fight she had lost. And the man who had left her to die. She hated weakness, hated needing help. And yet, she was still here because of him. Elias was across the room, crouched over a workbench littered with broken tech. His hands moved with practiced ease, stripping wires, patching circuits. The hum of his tools filled the air. "You're repairing weapons?" Zira asked. "Not weapons," he said without looking up. "Defenses. You'd be dead if I fought my wars head on." She tilted her head. "You don't fight?" "Oh, I fight," he said, glancing at her briefly. "But I fight to win, not to look brave." The words struck something in her. Among her people, courage was measured by how openly you faced death. Elias spoke of survival as if it was a skill more valuable than strength. She set the knife aside and stood. Her legs were shaky but held. Crossing the small space, she stopped beside him. "Show me," she said. He looked at her, one brow raised. "Show you what?" "How you fight to win." A small smile touched his lips. "All right, but you show me something in return." And so they traded. She taught him alien close combat techniques, swift, brutal moves designed to break an enemy before they could strike. He taught her human tricks, misdirection, using the terrain, setting traps to even the odds. At first, they spoke little. She watched his stance, corrected his grip. He pointed out blind spots in her attacks. But over time, the silence softened. One night, as they rested by the dim glow of a small heater, Elias spoke without looking at her. "First time I met your kind, you weren't holding a blade. You were holding a child." Zira frowned. "That's not possible." "My people." "We don't. You were different. Or maybe desperate," he said. A city was burning. Soldiers were everywhere. But you didn't drop that child. Not once. Something twisted in her chest. "What happened?" His eyes lowered. "Didn't make it. Neither did most of the city. They didn't speak for a long time after that, but something had shifted. The walls between them weren't gone, but they were thinner now." She saw the scars on his hands not just as marks of battle, but of choices, hard, impossible ones. Daz passed. Zira's strength returned. She moved faster, struck harder. The ache in her side was fading, replaced by a heat in her chest. She didn't quite understand. Then came the night when she heard the gunfire. Not far too close. Elias grabbed his rifle and moved toward the door. But before he could step outside, a burst of plasma fire slammed into the wall, sending sparks across the room. He fell back, clutching his shoulder. "Elias!" She was beside him instantly, her hands pressing against the wound. His voice was tight but calm. "It's nothing. It's not nothing," she snapped. Without thinking, she slung his arm over her shoulders and half dragged, half carried him toward the deeper tunnels. For the first time, their positions were reversed. He was the one bleeding, and she was the one keeping him alive. And as they disappeared into the shadows, one truth burned clear in her mind. Her life was his now, not because he saved her, but because she had chosen to give it. The night was too quiet. Zira stood at the narrow slit of a window, staring into the endless black of the desert. The wind had died, leaving only stillness. She didn't like it. The desert always whispered, always moved. Silence meant danger. Elias sat on the floor beside the workbench, his injured shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages. He was checking the ammo for his rifle when the radio hissed to life. A voice crackled through, sharp and urgent. "Elias, it's bad. Croth is coming, himself." Zira's stomach tightened at the name. The voice continued, "Not just him, elite. Hunters, 3 transports. Heat signatures say they'll be on you in under an hour." Elias looked up at her. There was no fear in his eyes, only calculation. "We have to move." "No," Zira said, her voice hard. "We can't outrun them. He'll follow until one of us is dead. It has to end here." Elias gave a small, grim smile. "Then we make sure it ends on our terms." They moved fast. Elias pulled open storage crates, revealing salvaged human tech trip mines, shock grenades, old automated turrets with blinking red lights. Zira added her own skill, wiring alien energy cells into the traps for extra power. The plan was simple: turn the shelter into a kill zone. While Elias worked on the outer perimeter, Zira walked the shadows, planting silent markers in the sand, small discs that would explode in a burst of plasma if stepped on. She remembered every insult, every cold word Croth had thrown at her. Tonight, she would return them with interest. The first sign of the enemy was the hum of hover engines, deep and steady. Then, the light's 3 sharp beams cutting through the dark. They came fast. Elite alien soldiers, armor gleaming under the moonlight, weapons raised. Croth walked at the front, towering, his yellow eyes burning with cruel satisfaction. He stopped just out of range, scanning the dark. "Zira!" His voice boomed, carried on the still air. "You're alive. I'm almost impressed." She stepped into the open plasma blade, igniting in her hand. "You betrayed your own soldier. Tonight, you answer for it." Croth laughed. "You were weak. You still are. And you're standing beside a human, a pathetic dying species." Elias's voice came from the shadows. "Pathetic's a strong word for the guy about to lose." The first soldier took a step forward and vanished in a flash of light. And sand as one of Zira's mines exploded. Chaos followed. Turrets hidden in the rocks spat bursts of fire. Shock grenades sent blue arcs crackling through the night. Soldiers stumbled into traps, weapons flying from their hands. Zira moved like lightning, her blade cutting down 2 hunters before they even raised their rifles. Elias fired from cover, every shot precise, every movement deliberate. But Croth was fast, too fast. He cut through the chaos, heading straight for Elias of Xeria, saw it and lunged, intercepting him. Their blades clashed, sparks flying, the air around them vibrating from the force. "You should have stayed dead," Croth growled. "Not until you pay." She spat back. The fight was brutal, each strike heavier than the last. Croth's strength was monstrous, but Zira's rage burned hotter. She drove him back, step by step, until a flash of movement. He threw a smoke charge, the thick cloud swallowing them whole. When it cleared, Croth was gone. Only the bodies of his fallen soldiers remained. Zira's chest heaved, her blade still glowing. "He'll be back," Elias said. Stepping up beside her. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the dark horizon. "Then we'll be ready." The horizon burned red. It wasn't the sun. This light was sharper, hungrier. War machines crawled across the desert, their glowing engines spilling fire into the night. Above them, black drones cut across the sky like metal vultures. Croth was coming back. Zira stood at the canyon's edge, her eyes locked on the approaching force. The narrow pass was the only way through, one choke point where they might hold the line. Her grip on the plasma blade tightened until her knuckles ached. Behind her, Elias worked quickly, planting the last of their explosives into the canyon walls. His face was pale from the wound in his shoulder, but his hands were steady. "You still have time to run," he said without looking up. She turned, her voice firm. "A warrior does not run. Not from this." He gave a small, tired smile. "Didn't think you would, but I had to offer." The rumble of engines grew louder, the ground trembling beneath their boots. The air smelled of smoke and charged metal. Once they hit the middle of the canyon, Elias said, "We bring the walls down, and if we fail?" Zira asked. "Then we make them remember why they feared us," he said, loading a fresh magazine into his rifle. The first wave of soldiers entered the pass, their armor glinting in the firelight. They moved with mechanical precision, rifles raised, their eyes searching. Drones swooped overhead, scanning the rocks. Elias fired first, a single sharp shot that dropped the lead soldier. The canyon exploded into chaos. Zira leapt from the rocks above, landing in the center of the enemy line. Her blade swept in arcs of blinding light, each strike dropping a foe. She was faster than she'd been in weeks, the pain in her side replaced by pure, burning purpose. Elias picked off targets from above, his shots precise and merciless. He moved between cover, planting charges as he went, forcing the enemy into tighter clusters where Zira could strike hardest. Then Croth appeared. He stepped through the dust and fire like a shadow given form, his massive frame dwarfing the soldiers around him. His weapon, a black-edged halberd, crackled with deadly energy. "Still alive," he called over the din of battle. "Good. I'd hate to kill you too quickly." Zira met him in the center of the canyon, their weapons clashing with a thunderous crack. The force sent shockwaves through the sand. Croth fought with brutal, crushing power, every swing meant to break her entirely. Above, Elias saw drones closing in on their position. He knew if they didn't trigger the charges soon, they'd be overrun. "Zira!" he shouted. She heard him, but Croth pressed the attack, forcing her back step by step. The edge of his blade scraped against her armor, sparks flying. In that heartbeat, she made a choice. She locked Croth's weapon with hers, leaned in close, and snarled, "This is for leaving me in the dust." With a sharp twist, she ripped the detonator from her belt and slammed it into her palm. The canyon walls erupted. Explosions tore through stone and sand, the shockwave hurling soldiers into the air. Massive slabs of rock crashed down, sealing the pass. Zira and Croth were caught in the center of it all. When the dust settled, Elias was scrambling over the rubble, calling her name. His heart pounded in his ears. Then movement. She emerged from the haze, blood on her cheek, her blade still glowing. But Croth was gone, buried under tons of stone. "You're insane," Elif breaking into a grin. "Maybe," she replied, her breath ragged. "But we're alive." The desert was quiet again, not the heavy silence of death, but the soft kind, the kind that comes after a storm has passed. The canyon lay still, its walls scarred by fire and explosions. Smoke curled lazily into the morning sky. Zira sat on a flat rock, her blade resting across her knees. Her armor was dented, streaked with dust, but her eyes were clear. The war, at least for her, was over, Behind her, Elias was working on the small transport they'd hidden near the shelter. His movements were slower now, each one careful, his shoulders still healing, but he refused to rest. "You should sit," Zira said without turning. He chuckled softly. "You've been telling me that for days. Doesn't work." She stood and walked toward him, the sand crunching under her boots. "Humans are stubborn," she said. He looked up at her. "And you're not?" She didn't answer because he was right. For a moment, they simply stood there, the wind tugging at their hair, carrying the faint scent of burned metal away into the distance. "You could go back to your people," Elias said quietly. "They'll call you a hero." Her jaw tightened. "I have no people. The ones I fought for betrayed me. The ones I bled for left me to die. Then what will you do?" She studied his face. His eyes were steady, the same as when he first found her in the dusk calm, unafraid, honest. "I'll go where you go," she said simply. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "Why?" She stepped closer, her voice low. "Because my life belongs to you, and my heart too." The words felt strange on her tongue. Warriors didn't speak of hearts. But she had learned that survival wasn't just about the body, it was about the soul. And somewhere between the desert and the canyon, Elias had taken hers without trying. He didn't say anything at first, just reached out, his hand warm against her cheek. "Then I guess we'll find a place where both can rest." They packed what little they had. No banners, no trophies, no reminders of the war, only weapons for protection and supplies for the road ahead. As the sun rose, casting gold across the desert, they walked side by side toward the horizon. A human soldier and an alien warrior. Two enemies who should never have trusted each other. Two survivors who had chosen to. And somewhere deep inside, Zira knew this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning.